Thanksgiving has a special knack for retrieving memories. The Thanksgivings of old, before the family had dispersed throughout the world, and before there were such things as ex-spouses and ex-brother-in-laws and step-grandparents numbering into double digits. God, remember those days? I recall a motley crew of family members gathered around our dining room table, which was expanded ingeniously throughout the entire first floor. This was the only way we could ever accommodate all those who knew ahead of time that they would eat more than they should. My mother's Aunt Trudy had the misfortune of sneezing every time she was fully satiated. She had that distinctive characteristic, or maybe it was a disorder, she had that her whole life. And so dessert was never served until Aunt Trudy sneezed, a signal that the plates could finally be cleared. She was full. My mother, who hated to cook, always fretted that the turkey would not be sufficiently moist, but everyone was always pleased with the meal, or at least pretended to be. I was sure my Southern Baptist cousin from Georgia missed his collard greens and candied yams from his childhood Thanksgivings. My Afro-American cousin smiled a lot while adding immeasurable amounts of pepper to his dish. And my Catholic brother always said grace before the meal, which made the Jewish side of the family just a little bit nervous. But we got through it all. The turkey, which on one Thanksgiving long ago, my father tried to carve with his new electric carving knife. What an invention that was. He was about as excited as a little kid to have this opportunity to show off his new toy. But though it hummed nicely when he held it aloft for all to admire, he might as well have been cutting bricks for all that knife did. In fact, the whole ritual associated with carving up the bird proved an utter disaster. And I remember my father throwing the electric carving knife into the garbage right then and there, chased by a few not so carefully chosen words. It made an impression on me, and I think I've been afraid of trying newfangled gadgets ever since that Thanksgiving. But we got through the meal, we got through saying grace, and we got through the holiday with gratitude. The food, always the customary Thanksgiving fare enjoyed by the Pilgrims hundreds of years ago, was nothing special, but it did feel like, sort of like comfort food. I don't know if the word gourmet was used much in those days, but the Thanksgiving fare was simple and filling and predictable and made us feel comfortable. Thanksgiving delivered to us a sense of contentment in an otherwise troublesome world. Apparently, such contentment never made it to the first Thanksgiving of 1621. That dinner, purporting to join new settlers and native people at the feasting table, an exemplary show in human relations, it didn't really happen. That scene that we hold so dearly in our collective minds now falls into the category of myth. The myth was spun mostly by Sarah Josepha Hale in the mid-19th century. She was a good writer, and she produced a convincing fable, but for a very noble reason. The Civil War was raging, and as we all know, it was tearing the country and families apart. And Hale applied relentless pressure on Abraham Lincoln to declare Thanksgiving a national holiday. Up until then, it was celebrated randomly. In fact, most of the South never had Thanksgiving, even long before the Civil War. But Lincoln decreed that Thanksgiving be a national holiday. You know, come to think of it, it may have been an executive order. Now, there's an example of government overreach. I mean, you know, once they tell you what you have to eat on the fourth Thursday of November, then, you know, it's just a stone's throw away from telling you what to eat every day. And the government saying if you don't finish your food, you can't have dessert. I mean, it's just a tremendous overreach by the government. But Lincoln implored families to sit down together at what he called the Feast of Fat Things, and to raise a toast to the Thanksgiving holiday. This cornucopia-inspired myth intended to bring the country together. If the Pilgrims and the Indians could tolerate each other's differences, then we had an inspiring image to hang on to, that diverse people could coexist peaceably. So the Thanksgiving table of 1621 was set by the myth makers to include a feast with a narrowly prescribed list of foods: turkey, corn, cranberries, squash, and pumpkin pie. A beautiful image indeed of rugged pilgrims sitting with Indians as equals, indulging in the New World's cornucopia with gusto. But actually, the Native American food that the Pilgrims supposedly enjoyed would have offended the palate of any self-respecting English colonist. We have on record the words of Charles Wood Mason, a fine, upstanding Puritan minister, who referred to the food as exceedingly filthy and most execrable. Execrable from the Latin meaning dangerous and cursed. But with the honest efforts of revisionism, the victuals laid upon the fictional table that first Thanksgiving dinner were actually food that the Puritans would rather have avoided. Sarah Josepha Hale conveniently forgot that the Puritans migrated to New England with strict notions of food production and preparation. They demanded that the flesh be domesticated, grain neatly planted, and fruits and vegetables cultivated in gardens and orchards. The English recoiled at the realization that the Indians hunted their game, grew their grain haphazardly, and foraged for fruit and vegetables. The English may have liked squash, turkey, and corn, but they were essentially grossed out by the Indian manner of acquiring these goods, and they refer to those methods as barbaric. In fact, there were allusions to the Indian food preparation as, I quote, the essence of savagery. These pilgrims, who, from my point of view, turn out to be a bunch of ingrates when you really look at it, looked for fences and neat rows of grain. They asked, where are the plows? Where's the team of oxen? Where are the yokes? For the Brits, hunting was more for sport. And when a farmer actually chased game to feed his family, he did so with tremendous shame. To resort to hunting was indicative of poor planning and laziness. And when the Indian men brought back from the woods elk, bear, raccoon, possum, wild turkeys, the Puritans looked upon all of that as a perversion of agriculture. We are graced with abundant myths about our culture. Perhaps these myths comfort us like certain foods that make us feel at ease. The Thanksgiving myth puts us in a better light than we really are. Probably most myths do. We like to think of our forebears celebrating their survival after a harsh winter, but then we add another layer of American mythology that claims We survive because we are so incredibly adaptable, and we are capable of overcoming our deepest prejudices. But are we? We are as divided today in our nation as were the Pilgrims and Indians of 1621, and we have yet to overcome our prejudices. We have yet to overcome serving our own self-interest. It was remarkable to read, and I know many of you were probably as appalled as I, because it really had a lot of media attention, to read just in these last couple of weeks about Arnold Abbott, age 90, who was arrested along with 2 ministers for feeding the homeless in Fort Lauderdale. There was no violation of health codes, simply, as the mayor of Fort Lauderdale explained, it's bad for business to have certain areas in town becoming magnets for the homeless. Not good for business. The organization that attempts to feed the homeless in Fort Lauderdale and other parts in Florida is called Love Thy Neighbor. A bit ironic, don't you think? When poverty is juxtaposed side by side with business, which one wins? Every time. Love thy neighbor holds no gravitas when it is perceived as undermining the bottom line. We look at poverty as, well, as something shameful, like it was for the British farmer who was forced to hunt for food for his family. Poor planning, lazy indeed. Does this all not beg the question, what do people deserve? And who gets to decide? Do you ever wonder just how much one deserves to be paid as head of a major corporation? Do you ever wonder if executive compensation should be tied to performance? Because we like to saddle poor people with personal responsibility. It even goes so far that I think we need to ask why a CEO deserves compensation when the company fails. If state governments set a minimum wage, shouldn't there be guidelines for a maximum wage? I mean, is there some rightful limit beyond which no one in good conscience could claim to deserve a certain level of compensation? And as our new Congress prepares to sue the president in efforts to unravel the Affordable Care Act, I want to ask what anyone deserves in terms of health care. And who decides? In an America which clings to the myth that deep prejudices can be overcome and that we all are people created equally, it is fair to ask, I think, does not every person deserve at least some minimal level of medical care, regardless of their ability to pay for it? And as we look at what a lightning rod immigration reform has become, we need to ask on this holiday earmarked for generosity, do only Americans deserve health care? And following the Vatican summit this week, where 300 religious leaders worldwide spewed their homophobia, why won't somebody ask, do only straight people deserve to be married? Do gay and lesbians deserve the same respect, protection, and opportunities afforded to straight people? Do gays and lesbians then deserve to be parents? And tell me, who decides this? Who decides? I believe that Thanksgiving needs to be deconstructed along with the myths that we hold about American virtues. The need to express gratitude for our bounty is obvious, and a call to generosity remains a vital necessity. But we also need to check the myths. They are myths that prevent us from achieving a more equitable distribution of our resources. America's bountiful harvest fails to reach far too many people. And the shocking increase of children raised in poverty must force us to scrutinize the myths more carefully. Those myths that insist we all have equal opportunities and we all must be accountable for our own situation. The myths about our American character swirl in the Thanksgiving air like the old myths about the Pilgrims. Jesus said, "Give us this day our daily bread," and he did everything he could to feed the poor. He believed that God filled the hungry with good things and the rich be sent away empty. So how would Jesus look upon the wealth that our government heaps upon these job creators so more crumbs fall from the table for the poor? Thanksgiving inspires the spirit of generosity, but we must look past the myths that make us feel good about charity while ignoring the systemic issues that lead to poverty in this opulent nation. The myths keep perpetuating injustice. How long? How long can people be denied the basic comfort of food and health care and respect that creates the dignity and well-being of all of our people? Now, the first Thanksgiving in the Massachusetts wilderness, a fable, but wisely crafted. It was designed to show us not to fear diversity. It was designed to show the virtue of bringing different cultures together over a feast. Why not? It was meant to prove that we are better as a nation when we work towards achieving a fair and more balanced society. It was designed to strengthen the meaning of hospitality, graciousness, and gratitude. So in the spirit of Sarah Josepha Hale, may we as a nation endeavor to make Thanksgiving a holiday that brings this nation together. May we share our bounty with greater generosity. May we make a conscious decision to mend the tenuous threads that barely hold us together. And may we strive to give all of our children an equal opportunity to sit at the banquet table together. And may we honor our traditional Thanksgiving hymn, which invites us to gather together. We must gather together, rich and poor, new immigrant and old immigrant, gay and straight, people of all cultures and religions. We gather together to ask that blessings flow upon our land that nurtures us, that blessings may flow upon our spirit, so that we may be able to offer love and compassion to all. So be it.